Being trained by Garp and meeting Shanks' crew as a child were crucial moments in Luffy's journey to becoming the pirate he is today. But what if all that never happened? In today's video, let's explore how the One Piece world would change if Luffy was raised under the watchful eye of the world's most wanted man, Monkey D. Dragon. Now, I actually feel a bit silly here doing a what if video about a character being raised by their own father, but Dragon had a pretty good reason for having Luffy be raised by Garp and the Dadan family. Baltigo, the Revolutionary Army's hidden headquarters on the island of White Soil, is pretty dangerous territory because you could never know when the Marines would attack. Think about it. Luffy's playground isn't some peaceful island in East Blue anymore. It's the strategic war room where Dragon plans to overthrow the world government itself. Our story changes radically when Luffy is just 6 years old, because when Shanks docks at Fuchsia Village, Luffy isn't there to meet him. This means he doesn't eat the Gomu Gomu no Mi and isn't even inspired to become a pirate. The entire symbolic weight of that straw hat passed from Goldie Roger to Shanks to Luffy never happens, and Luffy finds a different kind of dream instead. Luffy originally dreamed of freedom through piracy and finding the One Piece, but now he dreams of freedom through revolution. In canon, Luffy only really learned about the true nature of the corrupt world government after he became a pirate captain, but this time, Dragon shows him the reality from the start. Luffy still has that fire in his heart, and the unbreakable will of D in his soul, so even when he's a child, he decides that someday, he'll tear down the world government and the celestial dragons. Now let's talk about Luffy's training when he's a child, because things get pretty interesting given the range of mentors he has. The likes of Ivankov, Karasu, and Kuma probably won't throw Luffy into danger in the same way Garp did, but would instead put him through formal training in self-defense. This would probably include Luffy learning martial arts like Nukama Kempo, alongside observation and armament hockey. While he trains intensively during childhood, Luffy makes friends like Koala, Moda, and Bunny Joe. Naturally, Luffy never meets Ace, but he will eventually connect with Sabo, and the two end up becoming brothers just like in the original timeline. With a strong sparring partner by his side, Luffy grows even stronger and learns Ryusoken as well. But here's the real question. Is Luffy still as strong as he was in the original timeline without a devil fruit? Under Dragon's guidance, there's a high possibility that Luffy awakens his ability to use Conqueror's Haki pretty early on, making him a great candidate for a deputy commander of the Revolutionary Army. Now, before I get into what happens with the search for the One Piece and the fight against the world government, I need to settle the most pressing question of the storyline. What happens to the Straw Hat crew? Luffy might actually encounter some members of the crew on his missions for the Revolutionary Army, and one of the likeliest candidates is Roronoa Zoro. In canon, Luffy saves Zoro from Captain Morgan and Helmeppo in Shellstown because he sees a kindred spirit and needs a crew member. In this timeline, Luffy is operating in the East Blue as an independent revolutionary agent when he hears about a notorious pirate hunter about to be executed for standing up to a corrupt marine captain. Now, this is exactly the kind of injustice Dragon taught him to oppose, and Luffy doesn't even hesitate to break Zoro out. When Zoro learns the truth about the marine corruption and the world government, his goal doesn't change much. He still wants to be the world's greatest swordsman, but now he's doing it as part of the Revolutionary Army. Now, Luffy probably doesn't meet Nami in Orangetown since he and Zoro don't need a navigator, and we actually run into a problem here because of how the Revolutionary Army functions. You see, Dragon is only focused on taking down the world nobles, so pirates who take over villages like Arlong or Buggy aren't really his concern. This means that Luffy probably doesn't encounter the likes of Usopp either, and he won't meet Sanji since he doesn't need to go to the Baratier in search of a cook. Luffy might accompany Dragon on the mysterious mission he had in Logtown all those years ago, but once again, it's pretty unlikely that any of the Straw Hat crew members would be there. So Usopp probably lives out the rest of his life in Syrup Village, and Sanji would leave the Baratier in search of the All Blue someday without ever becoming a proper pirate. Now, the next crew member who actually has a good chance of running into Luffy is Nico Robin, because she's already a fugitive on the run from the world government. Robin was also a member of Baroque Works, and we know from the Dressrosa saga that the Revolutionary Army likes to keep tabs on the criminal underworld. Additionally, her ability to read poneglyphs would make Robin an invaluable asset for the Revolutionary Army. Given that she already has a vendetta against the world government, Robin would be much more sympathetic to the Revolutionary Army's cause, and Luffy would convince her to leave Baroque Works and join them instead. It's actually the same story for Frankie, because we know he hates the world government for what they did to Tom. Frankie also became a cyborg because of his injuries from Tom's rescue mission, so there's a lot going for him as far as joining the Revolutionary Army goes. But the best part is that we still haven't seen a dedicated shipwright in Dragon's ranks yet, meaning that Frankie would have a pretty important role to fill if he joins the Revolutionary Army. Chopper only joined the crew after curing Nami of the 5-day disease after the crew stopped at Drum Island, but in this timeline, Luffy doesn't even need to be there. Meanwhile, even if Luffy somehow meets them, Brook or Jinbei they don't really have a huge reason to join the Revolutionary Army, which means they'll go on their own paths independent of Luffy's journey. But now that an entire Yonko crew has disappeared from existence, what happens to the major events from the One Piece story? The major events of the Alabasta and Skypiea arcs probably won't happen at all, with Crocodile and Enel being allowed to operate freely in their own spheres of influence. The first time Luffy actually goes back to one of those arcs from his pirate journey is at the Sabaody Archipelago, as stopping a slave auction fits perfectly within the Revolutionary Army's agenda. However, Luffy is forced to evacuate when Kizaru turns up, as he's still not on a level where he can fight against the top tiers in the Marines. This incident becomes a turning point in Luffy's journey, and he connects with Rayleigh to train even further and master Haki. Now, I know you're wondering about Marineford, but since Luffy never met Ace, he has no reason to go there and prevent his execution. Ace probably still dies at the hands of Akainu, while Whitebeard also dies in a battle trying to save his son. So there are no major changes to the One Piece world here. Post-time skip, Luffy continues to operate as a high-level Revolutionary Army agent, taking on missions to destabilize world government, allied nations, and prepare for the final war. So where does this all lead? The saddest part of this timeline is that Luffy never wants to become the Pirate King, so our story never even goes in the direction of Laugh Tale. Instead, the endgame becomes the Revolutionary Army's assault on Marie Joie, and the final confrontation with the world government. But here's the wild card. We know that Hito no Mi Madonika chose Luffy, so would it still find him even if he isn't a pirate? If the One Piece is a weapon needed to take down the world government, it's pretty likely that Luffy the Straw Hat and Luffy the Revolutionary would have similar end goals. We know that Luffy's path converges with the Revolutionary armies in the final saga as well, as Sabo was literally in Marie Joie during the Revelry, which directly caused the events of the Egghead arc. But at this point, it probably is too late for Luffy to awaken the Nika fruit even if he does obtain it, meaning that he would be someone more like Roger, an incredibly strong fighter who relies on Haki alone. So while Dragon gets what he always wanted, a son who fights for justice and freedom, Luffy doesn't make any radical changes and becomes just another member of the Revolutionary Army. Without the Straw Hat Pirates, there's no inspiration for countless islands and no symbolic challenge to the Yonko system in this generation. Think about significant events like the raid on Onigashima. The alliance in Wano country never reaches its full strength, and there's no crazy Gear 5th moment in the battle against Kaido. This means that the alliance probably loses the battle, and Kaido and Big Mom still continue to operate as emperors, with Blackbeard's crew taking the 4th spot after Whitebeard's death. In trying to give Luffy the best training and the clearest purpose, Dragon would lose what makes his son truly special, the ability to be completely and chaotically free. And maybe that's why Dragon left Luffy with Garp in the first place. He knew that the will of D wasn't so simple and that he couldn't just point his son in the direction he wanted. Dragon must have realized that being raised as a revolutionary would only limit Luffy's worldview and wouldn't challenge him to dream bigger. But what do you think? Would growing up with the Revolutionary Army make Luffy a much tougher contender as we head into the final saga? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below.